Maria Santos couldn't remember the last time she'd felt her heart beat this fast. The fluorescent lights of the 7-Eleven buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across the linoleum floor where a single piece of paper, a lottery ticket, lay forgotten by its owner. She had watched the entire scene unfold as if in slow motion. The elderly man checking his receipt, putting his wallet away, and accidentally dropping the ticket as he adjusted his worn tweed jacket. The morning rush had been typical for the convenience store on the corner of 23rd and Main. The usual parade of caffeine-deprived office workers and sleepy students had filed through, creating a constant stream of movement that made the dropped ticket dance across the floor with each passing footstep. Maria had been waiting in line, her own lottery ticket clutched in her hand, her 14-year-old daughter Elena texting beside her. "Mom, we're going to be late," Elena complained, not looking up from her phone. Ms. Rodriguez hates when students come in after the bell. But Maria couldn't move. Her eyes remained fixed on that slip of paper, her mind racing through calculations of probability and consequence. The morning news had announced the jackpot was at $247 million, the kind of money that could erase her mounting medical bills, pay off the debt that had been slowly drowning her since her husband's death 3 years ago, and ensure Elena could attend any college she wanted. Time seemed to stretch like warm taffy as Maria watched the elderly man shuffle toward the door. His movements were slow, deliberate, each step accompanied by a slight wince that spoke of joint pain and years of hard work. She recognized him vaguely. He'd been featured in the local paper last year, retiring after 40 years of teaching at the nearby high school. "Sir," the word formed in her throat, but never made it past her lips. Instead, Maria found herself stepping forward, her movements feeling strangely disconnected from her thoughts. She bent down, fingers closing around the ticket. The paper felt warm against her palm, like it was alive with possibility. Her own ticket, purchased just moments ago, with her carefully chosen numbers, her wedding date, her daughter's birthday, suddenly felt worthless in comparison. At the counter, her hands trembled as she checked her numbers. The clerk, a young man with kind eyes and a name tag that read Jimmy, gave her a concerned look. "You okay, Mrs. Santos?" "Yes, just checking my numbers," she managed, trying to keep her voice steady. The screen confirmed what she already knew. Her ticket was a loser. But now, in her pocket, rested another set of numbers, another chance, another person's destiny. Elena tugged at her sleeve. "Mom, seriously, I can't be late again." Maria nodded mechanically, her mind still wrestling with the enormity of what she'd just done. As they pushed through the store's door, the bell chiming overhead felt like an alarm, a warning. The morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of autumn leaves and possibility, but all Maria could smell was the acid tang of guilt rising in her throat. She helped Elena into their aging Honda Civic, the door creaking in protest, another repair they couldn't afford. As she turned the key in the ignition, Maria caught her reflection in the rearview mirror. The face that stared back seemed different somehow, as if the weight of that small piece of paper in her pocket had already begun to change her. "Everything okay?" Elena asked, finally looking up from her phone, her dark eyes, so like her father's, filled with concern. "Everything's fine, Maja," Maria lied, pulling away from the curb. But even as she spoke the words, she knew that nothing would be fine again until she figured out what to do with the ticket burning a hole in her pocket and the conscience burning a hole in her heart. The walls of Maria's small 2-bedroom apartment seemed to close in with each passing minute. She'd spent the entire day in a fog, barely concentrating during her shift at the dental office, fumbling basic insurance paperwork that she normally processed with ease. Now, at 7:55 p.m., she sat perched on the edge of her worn beige sofa, the state lottery show's theme music filling the room with its artificial cheer. The stolen ticket lay on her coffee table next to a cup of tea that had long since gone cold. She'd taken it out of her pocket at least a dozen times throughout the day, studying the numbers until they were burned into her memory. 8 to 17, 23 to 45, 49 to 51. Her own losing ticket sat crumpled in the trash, a testament to her shattered moral compass. "Mom, did you forget to buy groceries again?" Elena called from the kitchen, the sound of cabinet doors opening and closing punctuating her question. "There's literally nothing for dinner except instant ramen." Maria couldn't answer. Her eyes were glued to the television screen where the lottery host, a woman with an impossibly white smile, was making small talk with her co-host. The drawing was about to begin. "Mom." Elena appeared in the living room doorway, concern etched across her young face. She was wearing her father's old University of Texas sweatshirt, the one that still somehow smelled like him even after 3 years. "You've been weird all day. What's going on?" The first number appeared on screen, 8. Maria's hands began to shake. The second, 17. Her mouth went dry. Third, 23. The room started spinning. Fourth, 45. She could hear her pulse in her ears. Fifth, 49. Elena was saying something, but the words were lost in the roar of blood rushing through Maria's head. The final number rolled into view, 51. Maria bolted from the sofa and barely made it to the bathroom before her lunch made a violent reappearance. She clutched the cold porcelain of the toilet, her body heaving even after there was nothing left to expel. The bathroom tiles pressed cold against her knees as the reality of what had just happened crashed over her in waves. $247 million. The number floated in her mind like a neon sign. It represented everything. Elena's college education, a house with a yard, no more double shifts, no more choosing between paying the electric bill or filling prescriptions. It was freedom. It was security. It was theft. "Mom." Elena's voice was closer now, filled with panic. "Are you okay? Should I call someone?" Maria reached up with a trembling hand to flush the toilet. "No, Maja," she managed to croak. Just something I ate." She pulled herself up using the sink for support and caught her reflection in the mirror. Her face was ashen, dark circles under her eyes more pronounced than usual. Behind her, Elena appeared in the doorway, holding her phone. "The news says someone bought the winning ticket at our 7-Eleven, Elena said, scrolling through her feed. "Can you believe it? Someone in our neighborhood is super rich now." Maria splashed cold water on her face, trying to wash away the guilt that felt like it was seeping from her pores. "Yes," she whispered. "I can believe it." "Mom." Elena's voice had changed, become softer, more worried. "What's really going on? You've never been good at hiding things from me. Not since Dad." Maria gripped the edges of the sink harder, her knuckles turning white. In the other room, she could hear the lottery show hosts excitedly discussing the local winner, their voices filled with speculation about who the lucky person might be. But Maria knew the truth. There was nothing lucky about what she'd done. She turned to her daughter, mouth open to confess everything, when her phone buzzed with a news alert. "Local retired teacher claims to have purchased winning lottery ticket. Says ticket was lost." Maria sat motionless in front of her small television, watching George Williams's weathered face fill the screen. The morning news anchor leaned forward sympathetically as the retired teacher described his routine of playing the same numbers for the past 30 years. "You see," George's voice cracked slightly, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses, "the first 3 numbers, 8, 17, 23. That was Catherine's birthday, August 17th, 1923. The last 3 were the day we met, April 5th, 1949. She always said those numbers would bring us luck someday." The camera panned to a framed photograph he held, a black and white image of a young couple on their wedding day, their smiles radiant with promise and hope. The anchor's voice softened, and Catherine passed away last year. 11 months, 2 weeks, and 3 days ago, George replied, his fingers tracing the edge of the frame. "This win, it would have meant I could fund the music program she always wanted to create at Jefferson High. Catherine taught music there for 42 years, you know." Budget cuts ended the program 5 years ago. Maria's hands clutched her coffee mug so tightly her knuckles turned white. She could hear Elena getting ready for school in the next room, humming the same tune she'd been practicing for her school band audition. The same school where George had taught mathematics until his retirement last year. Mr. Williams was always really nice, Elena had said last night, scrolling through social media posts about the missing ticket. He used to help kids with math during his lunch break. Never charged for tutoring like the other teachers. The news segment shifted to showing security footage from the 7-Eleven. Maria's heart nearly stopped as she watched herself on screen, a blurry figure in the background. The footage was grainy, but there she was, bending down, the moment of her transgression captured in pixelated evidence. "We're reviewing all available security footage," a lottery commission spokesperson announced. "We take claims of lost winning tickets very seriously." Mr. Williams has provided extensive documentation of his regular purchases and consistent use of these numbers. The scene cut back to George in his modest living room, surrounded by evidence of a life well lived. Shelves of books, student thank you cards yellowed with age, and a prominent empty armchair that Maria knew must have been Catherine's. "I'm not angry," George said, his voice steady despite his obvious distress. "I just want to fulfill Catherine's dream. She always said music could heal broken spirits. Lord knows our community needs that now more than ever." The camera lingered on his face as he described the music scholarship program he planned to establish. 20 full rides to college for students who couldn't afford instruments, let alone tuition. A renovation of the school's abandoned music room. A community orchestra program for at-risk youth. Maria's phone buzzed. A community alert. A GoFundMe had been set up for George Williams. The description read, "Help restore a local hero's dream." The goal was set at $50,000 for the music program. It seemed almost cruel now, that number, so small compared to the fortune Maria held in her possession. She clicked on the donor list. Former students, colleagues, parents. The comments told a story of a man who'd shaped generations of lives. "You helped my son believe in himself. Your patience changed my daughter's life. We need more teachers like you." Elena appeared in the doorway, backpack slung over her shoulder. "Mom, are you crying?" Maria quickly wiped her eyes, but fresh tears fell as she watched George Williams on screen, still clutching his wedding photo, still believing in the basic goodness of whoever had found his ticket. Just feeling emotional, Maja," she managed, knowing that each passing moment made her crime weigh heavier. Each new detail about George Williams making her stomach twist with greater intensity. The ticket, hidden in her bedroom inside her late husband's old Bible, seemed to pulse with accusation. The Lottery Commission's conference room felt sterile and intimidating. Maria sat rigid in her chair at work, watching the live-streamed press conference on her computer, grateful that her dental office cubicle faced away from her coworkers. On screen, investigators laid out their methodical approach to validating George Williams's claim. "We've obtained footage from multiple angles," announced Sarah Chen, the lead investigator, as various security camera views appeared behind her. The timestamp confirms Mr. Williams's purchase at 8:47 a.m. We're now analyzing all customer interactions within the following 30 minutes. Maria's hand instinctively touched her necklace, a nervous habit she'd developed since her husband's passing. The same necklace she'd been wearing that morning at 7-Eleven. The same necklace that was clearly visible in one of the grainy security shots now being shown frame by frame. Additionally, Chen continued, "We're working with facial recognition software to identify and interview all customers present during this time frame." A quiet gasp escaped Maria's lips, drawing a curious glance from her coworker Jenny. She quickly pretended to be focusing on a patient's insurance claim, but her hands trembled as she typed nonsense into the form. Her phone buzzed. A text from Elena. "Mom, everyone's talking about Mr. Williams at school. They're organizing a benefit concert next week. Can I perform?" Before Maria could respond, another message popped up. Also, Sophia from my class says her dad works for the Lottery Commission. They're going to interview everyone who was at 7-Eleven that morning. She recognized us in the background of one of the videos. The room began to spin. Maria excused herself to the bathroom, barely making it into a stall before her panic attack hit full force. She fumbled with her phone, pulling up the local news website. The story had exploded overnight. #JusticeForGeorge was trending locally, with former students sharing stories of his kindness spanning 4 decades. A new video had been posted, George Williams giving a tour of Jefferson High's abandoned music room. The elderly man ran his hand along dusty instruments, sharing memories of his late wife teaching there. Catherine would organize concerts right here, he said, voice thick with emotion. She'd stay late every day, helping students who couldn't afford private lessons. Some of them are professional musicians now. The bathroom door opened. Maria? Are you okay? It was Jenny. You've seemed off these past few days. Just a stomach bug, Maria managed, trying to steady her breathing. Well, the office manager wants to know if you can handle the Williams family account. Apparently, our new patient this afternoon is the teacher from the news, the one who lost the lottery ticket. Talk about bad luck, right? Maria's blood ran cold. George Williams. In her office. This afternoon. I don't think I can, she stammered. I'm not feeling well. Might need to go home. Back at her desk, the press conference was wrapping up. The Lottery Commission announced they were offering a $10,000 reward for information leading to the ticket's recovery. Social media was flooded with amateur sleuths analyzing the security footage, drawing red circles around suspicious movements, including Maria's heart stopped. One clear shot of Elena's distinctive backpack with its hand-painted sunflowers. Her daughter's next text made her stomach lurch. Mom, someone in my class posted screenshots from the 7-Eleven video. Is that us in the background? Why were you bending down near where Mr. Williams dropped his ticket? The walls seemed to close in as Maria stared at her phone, watching the 3 dots that indicated Elena was typing another message. Her finger hovered over the power button, wanting to make it all disappear, knowing she couldn't run from what was coming. The dots continued to pulse, like a ticking time bomb about to shatter her world. Elena's Saturday morning cleaning routine had always been predictable. Vacuum the living room, dust the photographs, and sort through the week's accumulated clutter. But this morning, as Maria watched her daughter from the kitchen doorway, something felt different. Elena's movements were mechanical, distracted. She hadn't played her usual cleaning playlist, and the silence hung heavy between them. Mom, Elena said suddenly, pausing by Maria's bedroom door. Your room's a mess. Want me to clean in there too? Maria's coffee mug slipped from her fingers, shattering on the tile floor. No. The word came out too sharp, too desperate. I mean, no thank you, Maja. I'll take care of it later. But Elena was already pushing the door open, the same determined look on her face that she'd inherited from her father. Come on, Mom. You've been acting weird all week. You barely sleep, you're jumping at every noise, and now you don't want me in your room. Since when do we have secrets? Maria stood frozen, coffee spreading across the floor like a dark stain, as Elena began straightening the bedroom. She watched helplessly as her daughter moved toward the bookshelf where Ricardo's Bible sat, its leather cover worn smooth by years of daily readings. I miss when Dad would read from this every morning, Elena said softly, reaching for the Bible. As she lifted it, a paper fluttered to the floor. Time seemed to stop as the lottery ticket landed face up, its numbers clearly visible. Elena's hands trembled as she picked it up. Maria saw the exact moment recognition dawned in her daughter's eyes, the widening of disbelief, the slight step backward, as if the ticket might burn her fingers. Mom. Elena's voice was barely a whisper. These are Mr. Williams's numbers. I remember from the news, his wife's birthday, and she trailed off, her face draining of color. The security video. You bending down. That's what you were picking up. Maria stepped forward, reaching out, But Elena backed away. "Mija, I can explain." "Explain what?" Elena's voice cracked. "How you stole from a man who spent 40 years helping kids like me, who lost his wife, and just wants to honor her memory." Her eyes filled with tears. "The same man who helped me with math last year when I was struggling, who never asked for anything in return." The silence that followed was deafening. Through the open window, they could hear children playing in the courtyard of their apartment complex, a normal Saturday morning for everyone else, while their world was shattering. "I thought." Elena's voice was different now, heavy with disappointment. "I thought all those times you told me to be honest, to do the right thing even when it's hard. I thought you meant it." She looked down at the ticket in her hand. Dad would have returned it. He would have run after Mr. Williams that morning. The mention of Ricardo was like a physical blow. Maria sank onto the bed, the weight of her actions crushing her. "Your father was a better person than me," she whispered. "No, Mom." Elena placed the ticket on the dresser, next to a photo of the three of them at her middle school graduation. All smiles, all innocence. "You're a good person who made a bad choice. But this isn't who we are. This isn't who you raised me to be." She turned to leave the room, then paused in the doorway. "You know what Mr. Williams said in class once. He said character is what you do when nobody's watching. But people were watching, Mom. The cameras were watching. I was watching. And now," she gestured to the ticket, "now God's watching too, from Dad's Bible." Maria stared at the ticket, Ricardo's Bible, and her daughters retreating back. 3 witnesses to her shame. 3 reasons to find her way back to the person she used to be. 3M found Maria sitting at her small kitchen table, the lottery ticket laid out before her like a judge's gavel. The apartment was silent except for the gentle hum of the refrigerator and Elena's soft breathing from the next room. She hadn't slept, couldn't sleep, not with the weight of her decisions pressing down on her chest like a stone. Her laptop glowed softly, open to her banking website. The numbers there told a familiar story. Overdue bills, mounting credit card debt, and a medical account still carrying the burden of Ricardo's final hospital stay. Next to it, her daughter's college brochure for the University of Texas cast a shadow across the table. Elena's dream school with its dream-sized tuition. "This isn't who we are," Elena had said. But who were they, really? A widow drowning in debt. A single mother watching her daughter's future slip away dollar by dollar. Or something more. Something Ricardo had always seen in them both. Maria pulled out her phone, scrolling through old photos until she found the one she was looking for. Ricardo in his Sunday best, standing in front of their church. It was taken the day he'd given his last sermon before getting sick, his favorite Bible verse quoted beneath the image. "For what shall it profit a man if he gains the whole world, but loses his soul?" Her fingers traced the screen, remembering how he would read to Elena every night, always ending with the same words. Character, mi amor, is built in moments of choice. The choice before her now seemed to pulse with each tick of the kitchen clock. $247 million. Enough to change their lives forever. Enough to secure Elena's future, to escape the crushing weight of poverty, to never worry about choosing between groceries and electricity again. But at what cost? She opened her phone's browser, the news article about George Williams still up from earlier. There was a new update. The community concert for his music program had sold out. Former students were flying in from across the country to perform. One quote stood out. "Mr. Williams taught us that music, like integrity, comes from the soul." Maria's eyes drifted to the kitchen wall where Elena's first band certificate hung, awarded by none other than Catherine Williams during her final year of teaching. Below it was a photograph of Elena playing flute at her first recital, her face glowing with pride. Mrs. Williams had stayed late every Tuesday and Thursday that year, giving Elena free lessons when Maria couldn't afford them. "She has a gift," Catherine had told Maria once, "and gifts aren't meant to be buried by circumstance." The same could be said of conscience, Maria realized, of integrity. of the example she wanted to set for her daughter. She stood up, legs shaky, and walked to Elena's room. Her daughter was asleep, the moonlight casting shadows across her peaceful face. On her desk sat her flute case, covered in stickers. One of them, Maria noticed for the first time, was from the Jefferson High School music program. Music speaks when words fail. Returning to the kitchen, Maria picked up the lottery ticket. In the dim light, the numbers seemed to rearrange themselves. Not just Catherine's birthday and anniversary now, but a test. A test of who she was, who she wanted to be, who she needed to be for Elena. She reached for her phone again, this time opening her contacts. With trembling fingers, she scrolled to P and found the non-emergency number for the local police department. Her thumb hovered over the call button as the first rays of dawn began to creep through the kitchen window. The morning light touched the lottery ticket, making it glow like a beacon. Or perhaps, Maria thought, like a path home to herself. The police station lobby felt colder than Maria remembered from the one time she'd gotten a copy of a fender bender report. Now, at 7:15 a.m., she sat in an uncomfortable plastic chair, Elena's warm hand clutched tightly in hers. The lottery ticket lay sealed in a clear evidence bag on Detective Sarah Martinez's desk, looking somehow smaller than it had in Maria's possession. "Let me make sure I understand," Detective Martinez said, her dark eyes kind but professional. "You found this ticket 5 days ago, knew it was the winning ticket, watched Mr. Williams' story on the news, and you're here now too." She paused, searching for the right words. "To make things right," Elena finished firmly, squeezing her mother's hand. Maria nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. The detective's office walls were covered in community service awards and family photos. One showed her at what appeared to be her daughter's graduation. She'd understand. Maria hoped. She had to understand. "Mrs. Santos," Detective Martinez leaned forward, her voice softening. "You do realize that by coming forward now, you're admitting to temporarily misappropriating property worth $247 million. That's not a small matter." "I know," Maria whispered, then straightened her spine. "But my daughter reminded me that we're not defined by our mistakes, but by how we correct them." The detective's phone buzzed. The Lottery Commission representatives had arrived. Maria's heart raced as two officials in suits entered the office, followed by a news crew they'd apparently authorized. The fluorescent lights suddenly seemed harsh, unforgiving. Then, through the office door's window, Maria saw him, George Williams, being led in by another detective. He looked older than he had on TV, more fragile, but his eyes were bright with anticipation. The next few minutes passed in a blur of verification processes, documentation, and official statements. The lottery officials confirmed the ticket's authenticity while cameras rolled. Maria signed papers, her hand shaking, but her resolve firm. "Before we proceed further," the senior lottery official announced, "Mr. Williams has requested to speak with Mrs. Santos privately." The room cleared except for George, Maria, and Elena, who refused to leave her mother's side. The silence stretched between them until George slowly reached into his worn leather briefcase and pulled out a familiar-looking photograph, the one from his TV interview, showing him and Catherine on their wedding day. "You know," he said, his voice gentle, "Catherine always said you could see a person's true character not in their mistakes, but in their courage to correct them." He smiled at Elena. "Your mother was one of Catherine's favorite parents at school. She used to tell me about the extra shifts you worked to buy that flute." Maria's eyes filled with tears. "Mr. Williams, I'm so sorry. I don't expect forgiveness." "But you have it," he interrupted, reaching across to pat her hand. "What you did today, coming forward, facing the consequences, that's the kind of lesson I tried to teach my students for 40 years. Sometimes the hardest math problem isn't about numbers at all, but about calculating the cost of our choices." Through the office window, they could see the news crews setting up for the official announcement. Headlines would soon blast across the country. "Missing lottery ticket returned. Local mother's honest choice. Teachers' millions restored." But in that moment, in that office, something worth more than millions was being restored. Dignity, integrity, and the spark of hope in Elena's eyes as she watched her mother choose right over easy, truth over comfort, character over wealth. Catherine's music program, George said suddenly, needs an administrator, someone who understands both numbers and the value of second chances. Would you be interested, Mrs. Santos? 1 year later, Maria stood in the newly renovated music room of Jefferson High School, watching students file in for afternoon practice. The space had been transformed from the dusty, abandoned room in George's video to a state-of-the-art facility, with gleaming instruments and walls adorned with photos of both past and present musicians. Catherine Williams's portrait hung prominently near the entrance, her warm smile watching over the room she'd loved so much. Beside it, a simple plaque read, "Music speaks when words fail." In memory of Catherine Williams, who taught us that every soul has a song. Mom. Elena's voice carried across the room as she entered with her flute case. Mr. Williams is here with the scholarship committee. Maria smoothed her blazer, still strange to wear after years of dental office scrubs, and turned to greet George and the board members. The past year had been a whirlwind of changes. Her story had gone viral, not for the near theft of millions, but for the choice to return the ticket. While some had criticized her initial decision to keep it, others saw in her story a reflection of their own moral struggles, their own moments of temptation and redemption. Ready for the big announcement? George asked, his eyes twinkling. Today they would reveal the first recipients of the Catherine Williams Music Scholarship. 20 full rides to college for talented students who couldn't afford instruments, let alone tuition. The room filled quickly with students, parents, and local media. Elena took her place with the school band, now first chair flute. From the back of the room, Maria spotted Jenny from her old dental office, who'd come to support her. Even Detective Martinez had shown up, her daughter now one of the scholarship applicants. George stepped up to the podium, looking more energized than he had a year ago. When I lost that lottery ticket, he began, I thought I'd lost Catherine's dream too. But sometimes loss shows us what we already had, a community that cares, students who inspire, and people who choose right over easy. He gestured to Maria. Mrs. Santos could have chosen differently. That ticket could have vanished forever. Instead, she showed us that character isn't about never making mistakes. It's about how we correct them. That lesson is worth more than any lottery win. The scholarship announcements began. 20 students, 20 dreams now possible. Elena beamed as her best friend Sophia, who'd been sharing her flute for practices, received the first award. The room filled with tears, hugs, and the sound of dreams taking flight. Afterward, as the crowd mingled over refreshments, Maria found herself by Catherine's portrait. The afternoon sun streamed through the windows, catching the gold frame just so, making it seem to glow. You know, George said, appearing beside her, Catherine would have loved this. Not just the music program, but what it represents, second chances, new beginnings, the choice to do right. Maria nodded, thinking of her new office down the hall, where she managed both the scholarship program and the school's finances. Her salary wasn't millions, but it was enough. More importantly, Elena now looked at her with pride again, and she could face herself in the mirror each morning. The funny thing about music, George continued, watching the students celebrate, is that sometimes the most beautiful pieces come from resolving discord. Through the open door, they could hear the first notes of the school band warming up for their celebration performance. Elena's flute rose clear and true above the others, playing the same tune she'd hummed that morning a year ago. But now it wasn't a solo. Now it was part of something bigger, something that spoke of redemption, of community, of choosing who you want to be, one note at a time. The melody floated through the halls of Jefferson High, carrying with it the promise that sometimes the richest rewards come not from what we gain, but from what we choose to give back.